Article 10, by petition, like I said, Bryan Moss is back, 16 Ruthin Circle. And this one's interesting. It's to vote to approve a resolution opposing any new or expanded pipelines carrying fracked gas in the town of Shrewbury and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, or to take any other actions. So we're going to get educated again.
I hope to, myself included. Okay, so I thought I would just go over some common questions about the petition and try to help answer them tonight for everybody. So what does the petition ask? It asks for the town to oppose any new or expanded pipelines carrying fracked gas in Shrewsbury and the Commonwealth, recognizing the added burden to the over 400 citizens in town that are landowners directly affected by the pipeline, and to the environmental and health burdens to those communities that are at the source of the fracked natural gas. This includes the West Boylston lateral that has just recently been proposed by Spectra Energy to go 5 miles through Shrewsbury. Because it's going to go under Flint Pond at Lake Quinsigamon, under Route 20, under Lake Street, under Oak Street, under Route 9, under Old Mill Pond, under Maple Ave, under Main Street, under 290, and under Newton Pond, running next to Shrewsbury High School and St. John's High School along the way. So that's just a brief description of the route that it's taking. So first, do towns actually have a say? This is a question a lot of people have been asking. Let's consider the proposed Kinder Morgan Northeast Direct Pipeline as an example. So I have a graphic here. Hopefully you can see it, but the Kinder Morgan pipeline is in the north part of Massachusetts here. More than 50 towns have passed similar resolutions to oppose that Kinder Morgan pipeline project. So you can see all those in red. All those in red are opposing the project. So you can see that's a pretty big swath of land there. From the Worcester Business Journal, Kinder Morgan had originally proposed a new pipeline to carry gas from New York across western Massachusetts and through several communities in northern central Massachusetts. But after protests from that area, the company revised its plans, skirting north central Massachusetts in favor of a route through southern New Hampshire. So you can see that without federal involvement, they actually rerouted based on the towns showing their opposition, like is presented in this resolution. So that's to answer the question around, do towns actually have a say in this? Do we need more gas in the region? It's another common question, I believe. Let's consider what Kinder Morgan, who currently supplies the area with natural gas right now, our Worcester area, Kinder Morgan supplies us with the natural gas that we have today. Let's consider what they had to say about it just recently, early this summer, on June 3rd, 2015. So from the Mass Live website, Alan Ford, the Vice President of Government Affairs for Kinder Morgan, said that the decision to scale back this portion of the pipeline project was commercial in nature. Speaking with reporters at the company's Beacon Hill office, Ford said that the distribution companies that would be supplied by that stretch of pipe did not see the need for it. So that is referring to the lateral that would have come off the main Kinder Morgan line. You can actually see Bolton and Berlin here in red as they both opposed that lateral, the North Worcester lateral, that was also going to go through just a little bit of the northwestern corner of Shrewsbury.
So can I interrupt you?
Yeah, sure.
I think what you need to do is start at the beginning and tell the public what it is that they want to send through the town, according to what you're telling us, how you know it, why are you concerned about it, and just give us those types of basic facts to begin with.
Sure. So these are some of the concerns. I think what I'm trying to cover is some of the basic type questions around, do we actually need the pipeline? Like, so that's one of the most common questions that, I think comes up. So I'm trying to answer those common questions around, especially to the Finance Committee. I want to make kind of also to consider the financial aspects of it. Do we need a pipeline? Do we need more gas? Should we spend the money on a pipeline? So maybe let me go a little bit further, and I'll try to, if you have the specific ones, maybe I could try to, if I don't address them next. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess, yeah, 'cause you just indicated that, what did you call it, the
Kinder Morgan?
the elbow coming down?
Oh, the lateral. So there was a
lateral. You know, you're trying to make a case for it's not needed, but you're telling me the lateral is not needed. Why don't you tell me that the entire pipeline is not needed?
Okay, yeah, I'll get to that too. I will. But for right now, I'm trying to focus locally on the region, so the Worcester region specifically. And maybe I do need to explain a little bit more, is that it was very confusing to me to start because there are two different pipeline projects going on. There's Kinder Morgan that has a pipeline project that's been going on longer. So they've had this Northeast Direct project that's been going on for a long time, a couple of years maybe. They were going to have a North Worcester lateral to come down to us in the Worcester region to feed gas. They have since, and I'm just getting to that now, they have since canceled that North Worcester lateral to come to the same spot that now Spectra Energy is considering a new project. Once Kinder Morgan canceled, Spectra has another larger Access Northeast project coming up in southern Massachusetts. And then also trying to feed a lateral to our region right here, and trying to feed that same spot in West Boylston. So what I'm trying to do is cover what, here we were with the Kinder Morgan pipeline, a lateral coming down to West Boylston up through Shrewbury. It got canceled, and I'm going through the reasons why that one was canceled. And now we're faced with another pipeline coming up from
Mansfield.
Mansfield with Spectra Energy back to the same spot in West Boylston. So I'm trying to consider what happened in the Kinder Morgan example and how it relates to this new proposed, so that we can get a sense of this isn't brand new. Pipelines are not brand. The pipeline projects are not brand new. A lot of people in the state have been involved with these, opposing them for various reasons that we're trying to cover. And I want to take the lessons learned from that and try to apply that to what's happening now, in that now that there's a shift, that there's a whole new project coming, and now not just in a little bit of corner of Shrewsbury, but actually through pretty much the heart of Shrewsbury, up those areas that I described. So I'll just continue. I just want to, I know I'm trying to show you the kind of what happened in the past here, what the reasons behind why Kinder Morgan's saying that we don't need it. We don't need a lateral. What they said here, it's they wanted to be transparent. Kinder Morgan said we canceled this lateral to West Boylston, citing that there is just not enough demand for natural gas in that section of Massachusetts to require the substantial investment. So here's Kinder Morgan, probably a competitor to Spectra, saying that it's not justified, that we don't need to bring it there. The shift of the pipeline spur, which is the lateral, commonly known in pipeline industry as a lateral, will remove the pipeline project from Bolton, Berlin, Boylston, Northborough, West Boylston, Shrewsbury, and a small portion of Worcester. So that canceling out of that lateral took those towns out of the picture. For the reason of, Kinder Morgan's reason, there's just not enough demand for natural gas in that section of Massachusetts. So Kinder Morgan has said that. We don't need to bring another lateral here. So in the Telegram and Gazette had coverage of that as well that happened in early June. So Alan Four, again, the Vice President for Public Affairs for Kinder Morgan, said then that the company has abandoned, I'm just a little bit repetitive, but to get to another point, has abandoned plans for the Worcester lateral off the main line. And the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission was notified of plans for the change on Tuesday back in June. Mr. Force said that the decision to not build the Worcester lateral had to do with customer interest and availability. The elimination of the Worcester lateral leaves only one area of new construction in central Massachusetts. On the plans, there is a lateral leading to Fitchburg and Lunenburg, so you can see they're being proposed all around the state. The company is expected to create a new meter station for Worcester, but other than that, there are no plans to use anything other than the main infrastructure already in place, because Kinder Morgan is the infrastructure that brings us to natural gas today. He said that the Worcester area will be served by Kinder Morgan with existing lines. We've been here for 60 years. So trying to kind of stage that Kinder Morgan also has an existing line that kind of that kind of comes through here too. And they're saying,
So Connor, may I ask a clarifying?
Yeah.
At what point could we get the actual facts regarding why we need the gas here? Because I think that that's helpful. You're stating an opinion, which I'm glad that you have the opportunity to do. But I think it's important to actually state the facts of what is before us as part and parcel of having it, because I want to make sure that people understand that what you're stating is coming out of reading materials that have been published. It's not coming from the actual client who is requiring that this new pipeline be built. So perhaps it would be helpful if we could just take, and I think this is what Mrs. O'Connor was saying in the beginning, if we could perhaps have the facts of what is coming before us stated and then move into the opinion part of why you believe that it shouldn't be necessary. Is that something
That's
that would
exactly-
be possible?
Yeah, I mean, you're telling us
I think just
why
for clarity
Kinder
of what we're
Morgan-
talking about.
You're telling us why Kinder Morgan is backed out, but now Spectra has come in, so evidently they believe there's a need. So you're trying to convince me to do something because Company A pulled out, but Company B is now here. So where's the need? By the time this pipeline gets built, it's going to be 2022. So obviously, there's going to probably be more need for gas at that point. They're planning ahead that there's going to be a need 6 or 7 years from now.
right. No, I understand what you're saying. What I'm trying to do, though, is present to you that if Spectra is going to come and say, we need the gas in the region, I just think it would be information that was posted in the news service that says another large, pipeline company is saying that already services us say that was not the reason they don't need it in that. So I'm just trying to give what one company is saying, not trying to say what you should think about that. Just trying to tell you what their representative says, so you can weigh it against what Spectra is going to say. So if Spectra says we need it, you have Kinder Morgan saying we don't. I would like to hear as well as you would the facts behind that, but I think it might be a relative fact that it was stated by Kinder Morgan.
To be honest with you,
Doesn't
I mean,
matter.
it's
Material.
It's hard to know how to weigh that, sir, because it's not somebody who's here presenting the facts, and it's also different clients who are actually putting these proposals forward. And I just think it's important as we talk about this issue to make sure within the public theme that there's a clear articulation of why something's being proposed, and then we weigh in with our opinions on that, which are informed by the things that you're bringing forward. And I just think that in terms of your own proposal, because you're coming here with an opinion on something, just to even state the nature of the project being proposed, I think would just help set the stage better for everyone to understand then why you're weighing in on why you believe it's not necessary.
I mean, to make sense of your argument, you'd have to see Kinder Morgan's business plan and their return on investment, which for whatever reason they decided to back out, versus Spectra now has a business plan with some return on investment that's saying it's a go.
Yep. I think that's a good
Mr.
point. I think
Bonnier?
this should weigh in on that.
I just have one thing.
Yeah.
The pipeline people came before the selectmen a number of months ago and explained that they were going to go through a whole series of public hearings and explain exactly what they plan to do on there. And I think we're just kind of jumping ahead a little bit too quickly here, trying to make a decision on this until they have their opportunity, make their presentation, exactly what's going to happen, where they think it's going to go, and what effect it's going to have on the homeowners. Now, you indicated 400 homeowners.
Yep.
Now, to what effect is it going to affect them, those homeowners? Because they abut the property, they're not going to be into their yards working. I think they're going to have access because they've got some encumbrance and easements because of National Grids coming through the town for I don't know how many years. But I think we're jumping forward too quickly here before we give them the opportunity to make the presentation to the town on a more formal basis, and also the community. And they've already stated they're going to have a number of meetings locally, Worcester, all over the state. So I think we're jumping a little bit too quickly, trying to, put this thing forward on a town basis.
Thanks for that feedback. To the point of these pipeline companies presenting information, As you can see, they've been presenting, different pipeline companies have been presenting throughout the state. So, a local example was a Bolton. In Bolton, they passed a resolution. A Bolton selectman, so let's consider what a Bolton selectman said about these meetings. They've had time to hear some of this, so it might be good to have some information on what he stated in the Bolton Independent newspaper. On November 6, representatives NSTAR, now Eversource, the pipeline's only customer identified by Kinder Morgan to date, attended a Board of Selectmen's meeting to explain their company's role as a customer for the gas to be transported on the North Worcester Lateral. In a telephone interview, Selectman Larry Delaney said that NSTAR representatives told the board they wanted to increase their service north. Delaney said that the gas to be transported on the North Worcester Lateral would not actually be available to the towns along its route. Now, it's different than Shrewsbury. Bolton's different. But was destined to expand NSTAR's customer base in other towns. He said sending this pipeline through Bolton to give NSTAR, now Eversource, a way to increase natural gas in Sterling and West Boylston is nuts. That's what he said. So who's going to pay for the pipeline? If I reference a Boston Globe article.
May I just address
ahead.
what you just said?
Yes, y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
NSTAR expanding, or Eversource expanding their customer base, is that a bad thing? Are we better off having people burning number 2 fuel oil, which is what home heating oil is? If we're going to look at this as a grand environmental issue,
Yep.
should we be burning home heating oil, or be like me or your father, who have electric heat, which means our houses are fired by coal, because 60% of our electricity comes from coal in this country. Environmentally speaking, is it better to be burning number 2 fuel oil or coal to heat our houses than it is to be burning natural gas?
Ms. Kane?
I'm assuming that's an open-ended question. Or do you
No, I'm asking specifically, Mr.
So-
Moss. Would you please address that?
Yeah, I will. So I have a graph here. This is from the Massachusetts Clean Energy and Climate Plan to the year 2020. What this shows is that Massachusetts is at the end of the energy pipeline, figuratively and literally. All of our fossil fuel-based energy sources, oil, natural gas, and coal, are derived from other regions of the country, the Gulf Coast, western states, and other parts of the world, many of them unstable or hostile to the United States. Thus, all spending on fossil fuel energy, whether to fuel power plants, buildings, or vehicles, flows out of state and fails to provide income to in-state businesses or employees. This exported economic value is significant, totaling almost $22 billion in 2008.
I apparently didn't ask my question very clearly. Are you better off burning diesel fuel,
Yeah.
which is what home heating oil is, to heat your house, or are you better off burning natural gas? Those are the options. We don't have magical solar panels that are going to heat our house now. For instance, you heat your house with gas, don't you?
I do. I heat it with natural gas.
Okay.
And I have electricity, and I actually pay the full amount for the renewable energy credits to get wind energy to cover all of my electricity costs.
Okay, how do you heat your house? With natural
With
gas?
natural gas, yeah.
Okay.
So I would say the answer is none of the above. Fossil fuels are nearing the end of their lifespan, right? The natural gas included. So natural gas, being a fossil fuel, is no longer a bridge fuel. We are at the end. We can no longer stand on the bridge.
There are 400 years of natural gas left in this country now.
And I do know that. We can't burn.
Can we just go on? Because I think it's more,
Well, I asked a question,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I still
sure.
haven't received an answer.
Yeah, I'm trying to get there. Do you want me to answer?
go ahead if you can do it quickly.
Yeah, so we need to keep 80% of all fossil fuels in the ground in order to achieve a livable planet in the future. So we cannot burn those 400 years of fossil fuels. So we must move towards a clean, renewable energy economy as quickly as we can.
And Mr. Moss, I just wanted to address your question regarding where the natural gas would be going, because that is a question that I actually asked myself at an earlier meeting. I wanted to be assured that the gas that was coming through Shrewsbury would actually be used in Shrewsbury, and I was assured that by both Spectra Energy and by Eversource, that the gas that would be going to West Boylston would be fed directly into our region, and the benefit will be less outages, of which have happened in the past, and also overall having more natural gas come in is going to lower the price for all of us moving forward. So I'm not sure, again, I think it's very difficult to compare the Kinder Morgan line and this line as directly apples and apples. It's a bit of apples and oranges, and despite what they may be doing on the Kinder Morgan line or not doing, the questions that we've asked of Spectra Energy as they've come before us as it directly relates to this pipeline is that gas is going to be directly used within our service area and benefiting us as residents along with the other members of the 27-mile lateral. So I just want to clarify that for you, that this is being used here.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. I agree that it would be used regionally if we bring the gas in. This graph shows what happens, though. This graph shows that we spent $22 billion in 2008 on fossil fuel energy, and all of that left the state. 80% of that leaves Massachusetts. So $18 billion left the state, as from a financial perspective, in 2008. So if we hook up more gas, that means more dollars flowing out outside the state.
These dollars are actually, the goal of this line is to have more supply, which will in the end decrease the amount that you and I, as natural gas, I have natural gas in my home as well, what we're spending on our bills. And that is part of the reason for having the pipeline come up, is because the cost of gas in the New York area is half of what we're paying here. And part of that is because there is sufficient supply. We don't currently have sufficient supply here. It's an issue we've been working on at the state level. It's an issue that the New England governors have been working on as a whole, and it's an issue that is something that is of a concern to us in this area, because we do need more supply. We can't meet what we have now, and both from a residential and from a business commercial development, we need to have more. So ultimately, in terms of looking at what is the best option for us, from the presentations that we've had and the questions that we've asked, this is an option where we've been assured that it is coming directly back to us as homeowners and businesses for the opportunity, and it's also something that is needed. So again, I think it would be really helpful if in the critique that you're putting forward, which I wholeheartedly appreciate that you're doing because you have the right to do that. You've met the requirements of that. I just think it would be beneficial to focus it on your objection to this 27-mile, not as opposed to the Kinder Morgan development, but as opposed to what your issue is with this one. I just think it would be helpful for both the people listening and for those of us trying to answer some of the questions or ask you more questions.
Okay. So that's what I was trying to say. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is to tell us exactly that, because that's what the public wants to hear. The rest of it gets confusing at this point because we're not hearing exactly what you're opposed to.
Do you want me to read the petition?
No, I just want you to tell the public why you oppose.
Oh, I am. Okay, so let me continue.
Question?
Yeah,
Are
go
you
ahead.
just in terms of
Yeah.
and it may be because you're also referencing the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, perhaps your
Yes.
resolution isn't actually specifically addressing this pipeline before us. It's addressing, as a whole, the issue of pipelines and more supply coming into Massachusetts.
Yeah, you're correct. That's correct.
So that is why you are not.
Right. So when I opened, I said for the town to oppose any new or expanded pipelines carrying frack gas in Shrewbury and the Commonwealth.
Are we? Right. Can I just ask? Dan has stepped out, but are we? Can we actually address a petition that addresses outside the boundaries of Shrewsbury? Legally, are we allowed to?
I would say why not? It's a petition. We don't like something, so we're telling you, the state level, we don't like what's happening.
I think that's a really good question. I printed out out of the 50 town resolutions that passed.
Do they all say the same thing?
Mine references the Amherst, Mass. Town resolution. Except for I did add in that there were 50 other towns at the time that they didn't put. But I do have here the 50, and they do have similar language, opposing for similar reasons.
Outside the boundaries of just the municipality.
Yeah, they oppose their town and in the Commonwealth.
Okay.
So I didn't have all 50, but I do have a pretty hefty weight here.
Do you want Mr. Morgado to answer your
I was
question?
just curious, Mr. Morgado, as to, in terms of the petition, can we bring something forward that is a petition both for the town of Shrewsbury and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, or are we limited in terms of our jurisdiction?
The wonderful thing about our system here in Massachusetts is the latitude is quite broad.
Okay.
So resolution, it's a non-binding resolution, so the town meeting can pretty much
Offer
do
it.
whatever it wants. The ultimate question of whether or not the resolution is in proper form will lie with the town moderator. Because the question is always, is the motion within the scope of the article? But the article is pretty broadly written, so that's the beauty of our system here in Massachusetts. 10 signatures for an annual meeting, 100 signatures for a special town meeting. This is non-binding. It has no authority. It has no effect.
Okay. Thank you.
So you brought up a good point about the lowered rates. So with an influx of, I think, probably doubling the natural gas to the area, if there's potential for lower rates, one of the things that we have to consider in that financial perspective is lower rates, but who's going to pay for the pipeline? So if I look at a Boston Globe article, Spectra Energy and Northeast Utilities, the parent of NSTAR, and Western Massachusetts Electric said they would invest $3 billion in the whole Access Northeast project, not just the lateral, but the entire one, to bring an additional 1 billion cubic feet of gas a day into New England, or enough to supply about 3.5 million homes. The project, if approved by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which regulates interstate pipelines, would be completed in 2008. I think they may have changed. Maybe it's 2008 to 2020 when completion dates. May said the project cost would be recovered from customers over the first year following the project's completion, as is typical for such capital investments. So from a financial perspective, we have to consider, if I go back to the multiple pipelines, we have Spectra's that's going to cost $3 billion, recovered by who? Us, the ratepayers, and Kinder Morgan's line, which is $5 billion. So that's $8 billion that we have to pay in order to get lower rates. And then also we have to consider that 80% of all that money, the $18 billion that we're paying on fossil fuel energy, is leaving the state. So a lot of what we're saying in the resolution, so this is true, in the resolution we say instead of supporting the pipeline to bring more fossil, we want to champion renewable energy. And when we champion renewable energy, we bring forward the urgency of not investing in new fossil fuel infrastructure like pipelines.
Excuse me if I could
Yeah.
just interject. $8 billion divided by 10 million clients, I'm guessing, across that multi-state region is $80 per year, or what, $7 a month, if that were to be recovered in the first year.
Yeah. That's a good point. How much? So if
I don't think that's
say we,
unreasonable for.
no, it's a good point. If we do the math and say how much does that affect each person, what is the lower rate? How much will? So I would just say, try to consider how much. I don't know the answer. How much would our rate be lowered? But I do have this graph here, and I printed it off, so we'll take it. This is the energy price volatility. So this just shows the energy price volatility for fossil fuels in Massachusetts. So we have natural gas. So if you can see the volatility of price from 1998 to 2010, it's pretty volatile, right? So how much are we really going to save? It's not this line where we save. I'd be curious as a...
The trend is declining, though. That's right.
Well, yeah, it goes up and down, so we don't know if there'll be that.
No, you can see in the graph, the trend is declining.
Yeah. So I just wanted to point that forward, that I'd be interested to find out that answer. Maybe that would be something you would be interested in finding out, is how much the actual
So
rate is.
tell us what you want us to know.
Okay, so fossil fuel companies have many times the reserves than can be safely burned. If we burned all those reserves, the 400 years of them, there would be catastrophic climate change. Therefore, the majority of coal, oil, and natural gas reserves are unburnable and need to stay in the ground as stranded assets. By supporting these companies, we risk their assets becoming stranded and worthless if international agreements on climate change are met. There's one coming up in Paris in December. Eliminating carbon from the portfolio of new energy investments now can help us avoid this carbon risk in the future. Wasted capital. If capital expenditure by the fossil fuel industry continues at the same level over the next decade, it would see up to several $1 trillion in wasted capital developing reserves that are likely to become unburnable. These fossil fuel companies are spending 5 times more on seeking new reserves than they are returning capital to shareholders, even though the current reserves already exceed the carbon budget, which is in this graph here. So we have the carbon budget, which is, this is all the reserves left that the fossil fuel industry can burn, and this little slice is what's allowable to keep us under that 2 degrees Celsius agreed upon target to have a livable planet. Investing our capital instead, all of that money instead, in clean renewable energy infrastructure, instead of new fossil fuel infrastructure, will allow our town and Commonwealth to address a number of challenges, including climate change. Most importantly, it will give powerful impetus to the clean energy revolution that has already begun. This is not a vision of a possible future for Massachusetts. This is Massachusetts today. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions? Ms. Vedder?
Bryan, you mentioned, I believe you said that there are 50 towns that have passed resolutions. Is it identical to the one that you're proposing that we pass? I mean, how? I'm just thinking 50 towns is a lot. I know people, it's difficult for you to get through your points, but I think 50 towns speaks pretty well that they found enough to do that. But what I want to understand is how close those resolutions are to what you're proposing.
Okay, that's a good question. So I can leave you with these, actually. I printed out, they have them on, they have all 50 towns on a website, and they have a portion that's available. But the Amherst one is almost, I actually took that one because I didn't want to, I'm not just creating this myself. Good point. I took the Amherst one that was passed in Amherst, Mass., and, just edited a little bit to be applicable to Shrewbury. The rest of them address the same points. They all address fracking. Stand with communities,
So
and they don't want the frack
You're
gas.
saying, so you took the one from Amherst, it's pretty close. Out of the 50 towns that have passed these resolutions,
Yep.
was that in response to the Kinder Morgan? Was it in response to this pipeline? Or could you give me a little, what was causing these towns to take this action and cause these resolutions, pass these resolutions?
Yeah, that's a good point. So these resolutions happen over time, but yes, as I've talked to some of these people that have been leading some of these efforts in Western Mass. It all started where they might be on their property and have surveyors knocking on their door saying, we want to survey, and find out that way and see it's going to affect their property and start from that perspective. And then those towns, all of those towns in that path, the citizens agreed, and they did that. Now, there are towns that aren't in the path, and they were saying, we want to stand with the other communities that are affected by this.
So those red spots there, those are the 50 towns that have passed resolutions.
Correct.
Now, to Representative Kane's point, this pipeline that we're talking about, with the answers that she's gotten, that this region will benefit, that the gas will go into this region. The Kinder Morgan, were those towns just in the path and would not have benefited at all from that? Where's the gas going? I mean, Is that why they passed the resolution? Because it's going through my town, but I'm not getting any benefit out of it.
It's a great point because, it does all start with the land, a lot of times start with the landowners. For example, I started with a lot of these environmental positions, right? I'm trying to get through the climate change and the fracking. But getting those 103 signatures, I ended up down the power line stretch, knocking on people's doors, asking if they wanted to sign the petition to oppose the pipeline. And when they opened the door, they were happy to see me. So these landowners, I think, are feeling isolated. They have the energy company coming and knocking on their door. They're not sure what to do, what it means. They don't want it there. They've told them they don't want it there. So I'm saying that it starts with that.
My question was, Representative Kane has already said that there would be some benefit to this region with this proposed pipeline. What I'm trying to understand is that those towns, out of the 50 that have passed a resolution similar to what you're suggesting that we do, were they towns that were going to just have the pipeline passing through and they would see no benefit from it? So I'm trying to understand that.
I'll try to answer the best I can, but this pipeline was going to go and deliver gas to Dracut, which then would connect to these other maritime ones. So a lot of this opposition is to potential exports out. And their resolutions, though, I think while they started in that I'm a landowner and I care about my backyard, they all said not in anybody's backyard. They're saying that we are standing with the communities that do not want to have this, put this burden on these communities in Pennsylvania that have this fracking and health issues down there.
So you're saying that maybe it isn't just that, it was the global concern. So
I
think that's what you're framing here. We've got a couple things to consider. One, the environmental global issue.
Yep.
And then also as this community, we've got to weigh what the potential benefits would be for increased gas supply and therefore rates. And we have to weigh those type of things. So what I think I'm hearing is that Shrewsbury has got a little bit more to weigh because we could potentially benefit, but then we've also got to weigh our conscience as far as the environmental issues, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I will even quote Elizabeth Warren, a Mass state senator, the U.S. senator. Before we sink money in gas infrastructure, we have an obligation, wherever possible, to focus our investments on clean technologies of the future, not the dirty fuels of the past, and to minimize the environmental impact of all our energy infrastructure projects. We can do better, and we should. And I think all these towns are saying, yes, we want a different path. We want to champion renewable energy. We want to spend our money on renewable energy. We want our towns to spend money on renewable energy. We do not want our towns to spend money on fossil fuel infrastructure.
Mr. Masiello.
Until we reach that point that we have clean, renewable energy, we do have to keep the lights on and heat our homes. And if I may share an experience I've had, I've done a lot of power plant work over the years. I've worked at diesel plants. Imagine we still have diesel power plants in this country. I've worked at coal plants. I did a lot of work up at Salem Harbor Power Plant. And as you drive up there, for a half a mile, you see nothing but empty lots because PG&E buys every house around that coal-fired plant so that they don't have another leukemia lawsuit. Mm-hmm. And then when you get to the harbor, there is just a 400-yard radius of dead black harbor. In a beautiful harbor, you've got just this blight upon it. And when I would work there, there was just this constant coal dust film on everything. Mm-hmm. And for the hour and a half I drive home, I'd sneeze. And working at Brayton Point, it was just as nasty. It was just a filthy, horrible place. In the diesel plants that we worked at, they stink, they're loud, they're filthy. Yep. And when I go to natural gas-fired power plants, they're clean and they're quiet. Mm-hmm. And you look at the smokestack and there's nothing coming out. Mm-hmm. Just NOx gases. You know, as opposed to coal, you have mercury, sulfur dioxides. And jaws are going to hit the floor when I say this. Barack Obama's right. We need to wean this country off of coal. He was right. You know, even a blind squirrel finds an acorn every day. We need to wean this country off of coal. And we'll never be able to shut down Brayton Point. We'll never be able to shut down Salem Harbor if people keep fighting these natural gas pipelines. And you know what? When that pipeline hits Shrewsbury, I'd love to see Selco build a little 50-meg power plant and we can generate our own electricity and keep that money in town. Yep. That would give me a warm fuzzy to see Selco's little power plant sitting there at the end of the pipeline.
You know, I agree with you.
And like I said, until we have renewable, clean energy, we need this running to our state. And I wish people would stop opposing these pipelines because they're good for the environment and they're good for our economy.
All right, so can I respond to that? Because it's a direct statement, so I want to respond to that, please. So, in one hand, you have the end result, a cleaner burning fuel at the end. But you can even see, I've talked to people in town that have families that live in Pennsylvania where this natural gas has gotten. the environmental disaster that is created down there, we don't see here. And in all of these resolutions that I'm going to hand you tonight, they specifically reference that, because when they do hydraulic fracturing to pull that natural gas out now, they take water and they add a toxic fracking fluid to it, and they pump millions of gallons per well down into that. It kind of blasts it down there to get that natural gas out. This is an extreme form of fossil fuel extraction.
Mr. Sigelnik.
Now, what's interesting about that is that hydraulic fracturing is exempt from the Safe Water Drinking Act. And why is it exempt from the Safe Water Drinking Act? They don't have to disclose what chemicals they're using, but they have in different testimonies had to disclose some, and they include endocrine disrupting chemicals, carcinogenic chemicals. So what we're doing is polluting the drinking water of people in these other states, and these towns and ourselves need to consider that in the impact to those communities, even though we cannot see it from when it's burned here.
Mr. Sigelnik.
Yeah.
See,
Then we'll close.
the problem I have with you as an environmentalist is you stand up here and tell me you want to have clean, renewable energy, but yet the Cape Winds project is 10 years behind schedule because the environmentalists are the people fighting it, saying that they don't want it because of where it's put. You can't have your cake and eat it too. And I sincerely have a problem with that. And you're right, until we can do renewable energy, we need gas. And renewable energy, to do 3.5 million homes that we talk about, isn't 5 to 7 years away.
Ms. Miller?
Oh, but can I address
Ms.
that?
Miller had her hand up.
Let me just, I just wanted to say, I think it's been an informative discussion. I think that this is a political and a philosophical and a whatever discussion that would be an ask to consider here in town, and I think that's viable, and I think it's a long-term discussion that's going to continue for a long time. I think Ms. Vetter summed it up pretty well in that you're asking the town to take a political position, but what's in front of us is a practical decision that we need to make regarding the residents and the taxpayers of the town of Shrewsbury and the immediate need for some residents to heat their homes this winter, because we did hear before the Board of Selectmen that there are currently people in Shrewsbury who cannot get enough gas to their homes in the winter, an adequate supply to adequately heat their homes. So we have to take that into account, as well as the supply coming through here. But you cited, in fairness, I think, a number of communities, to your question, about 50 communities that have decided to take this political pledge. But just on the Telegram, North Central Chamber endorses the Kinder Morgan pipeline. So the North Central Massachusetts Chamber of Commerce, which I'll read this quickly, runs mostly through parts of Western Mass, Southern New Hampshire, ending in Dracut, has to do with the Fitchburg Lateral, has endorsed that pipeline. Again, not trying to confuse things here, but to the point that there are communities that find that this to be a difficult decision, but they are looking in terms of immediate needs and what they need here, now, and today to supply fuel for their residents. So I just offer that in terms of consideration that there are communities who are signing on.
Yes, sir. State your name, please, for the record.
My name is Stephen Baer. I'm a resident of Shrewsbury. There is enough gas to go around right now, and as far as the pipe coming in, it's not going to solve the problem this winter with anybody. We're talking 2022, so if people are having problems today, they're going to be freezing in the winter, supposedly, until 2022. Okay, so we're talking the future. The pipeline company gets their foot in the ground. You can't stop them. Okay, pure and simple. What we're talking about also, some of these chemicals that sorry, I'm bad with names. Bryan, thanks. Some of these chemicals that Bryan spoke about don't just stay in Pennsylvania or wherever. They carry through the pipeline. Those endocrine disruptors, those carcinogens, they come through the pipeline. They don't burn off, some of them. You open your tap up, you're burning it. It's getting into the air. Radon and toluene. There's a bunch of them. There's a problem there. There are three things that you have to consider financially. One is the safety of the community.
What percentage of leaks occur in pipes? Recently, August 20-something or other, 2015, this group called HEAT, Home Energy Efficiency Team, started mapping where leaks were. Some of these leaks are close to 29, 30 years old in the Boston area. We have leaks here in the Shrewbury area, which I happen to have on a plan here. The red ones are resolved. The yellow ones aren't, if you can see that. I can pass that around if you want. Worcester has a similar thing, probably threefold as much. If you want to control how much gas is getting through the pipe right now, why don't they fix their leaks instead of putting in new infrastructure? It's cheaper that way. For us, we don't have to pay for, well, actually, we are paying for this gas that leaks out. We actually pay for the gas we don't use. Okay? That gas is not carbon dioxide, that's methane. That's 26 times more potent than carbon dioxide as far as causing greenhouse gas effect and flooding Boston eventually because of changing weather, high tides, high winds. You don't see that kind of stuff going on because it's invisible. Invisible, out of sight, out of mind. That's fine. That coal dust fell on cars, and you can see it. It's tangible. This stuff is not tangible. You're hurting people. So what are you going to be paying for in health insurance for people and their health? You're putting this pipeline near a school, 2 schools actually. If that thing blows, are you willing to have your children or grandchildren in the school when that thing blows? Do you want to set them up for that kind of thing? That's a safety factor. The fire department can't do anything because the company says, you can't touch that. Just keep everybody out of the area, secure what you can. The fire department has to stay behind. We'll shut things off. They shut things off in Houston. That's where the shutoff is. And whatever's in the pipeline, that's 16-inch pipe, 30 PSI, is going to burn until it's done. Then they come in and take care of it. You can't control that fire. The other end of this thing that Jason, Bryan, thanks, I'm bad. Bryan was talking about is a pipeline going from Millbury up into West Roxbury. Eventually, it'll hit Drake and go on to the Maritimes. That's sold. That's bye-bye. Goodbye. You're paying for that structure to be built also. Okay, so your gas prices go down, perhaps, until it hits the Maritimes and goes over to Europe. They say they're not going to do that. What's going to cost in taxes to pay for the pipeline? So your price of your gas perhaps goes down. The cost of other fees goes up. It's a balance. So wash. How much are you actually saving? What's the cost benefit of building this pipeline? Is it a wash? Is it more costly or is it less costly? Shrewsbury's going to grow. There's a growth factor here, right? How much more gas or how much more growth are you going to have that you need that much more gas? Presently, we have in the Worcester area a pipeline coming in from the top, pipeline going from the bottom. There's a loop there, okay? One company, I think, is Tennessee Valley. The other company is, what the other company is? I need help.
Sure.
There's another company. They can pick and choose which company they want to pay for, okay? So they can play games with the price. They can compete one against the other. In the past, they had low gas in this area because there was a regulator that wasn't in place. Now there is a regulator that's put on to the hospital. With that regulator in place, there's more pressure for us. There's 2 pipelines going across the New Burns Bridge. I can't mention what the other pipelines are, but there are 3 pipelines coming out of that area that from the Worcester Loop. Do you really need the gas? What's the cost-benefit analysis? The third thing, I can't recall what it was.
May I ask a question, Mr. Morgado? Do we collect taxes on pipelines?
Yes, pipelines are taxed, yes. There's a real estate tax that's assessed on pipeline and appurtenances and equipment. That's correct.
Do we have any idea how much we collect on those? But I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
These are values that are set on a statewide basis, very similar to Verizon equipment and utilities. Some of the numbers I've seen, mid $400,000 per mile of value.
Okay.
Upwards of that. It really depends upon what other infrastructure is there. So there is.
This is a compressor station or
right,
something, yeah.
Compressor station, then this is, I don't think there's going to be anything in town other than a line. It's about 5 miles long, is it? 5 miles. So without actually knowing what I'm talking about, say using low number $400,000, say $2 million in the value.
Thank you. Thank you. Sir, you had a question?
No, I'd like to make a few points if I might.
And state your name for the record.
Sure. My name's Fran Manella, and I live in Hancock Street in Shrewbury. Excuse me.
Yeah, do you want me to?
Sure, just a minute. I just need a few minutes. I know you guys are tired and want to get home, but I have trouble with a lot of what I'm hearing here tonight. The article in the petition seems to be more of an attack on fracking than it is on a gas pipeline. I don't particularly care where the gas comes from. If it's going to be fracked out of the ground, it's going to be fracked out of the ground. There's plus. Fracking's not pretty. There's pluses and minuses to it, a whole lot. But there's been no instances from the New York Times of the actual fracking causing any damage to the groundwater, because the fracking occurs so much deeper and the groundwater levels are typically way up here. If the well's developed right, that won't happen. I just want to also point out a few things to the committee that this is a report coincidentally done for Kinder Morgan by a company called ICF. In the interest of full disclosure, I don't work for ICF, but I know them. I work in the power generation industry, so I have a lot of background in what is being discussed here tonight. And I think it's misplaced to say that we don't need the capacity. We do need additional capacity. We're losing generation from nuclear and from coal and from oil as fast as they can be shuttered down. Those generation assets have to be replaced in some fashion. Typically, they're replaced by electric generators that use combined cycle plants, which are gas-burning turbines that feed into a heat recovery steam generator, a very efficient way of burning gas and developing energy. A couple of facts from this report. Now, you got to view it through the prism. It was prepared for Kinder Morgan, so it's going to have their slant on it because that's the guy that they're paid the bill. But projected demand and supply in normal winter days in New England looks like it's going to be lacking by 1 or 2 billion cubic feet per day in load swings. In other words, the capacity that we have is less than the demand by a significant amount. By 2020, the duration of capacity deficits approaches 78 days, which is about half of a winter season that we don't have the capacity to heat the homes locally. Another thing that you should consider is that the pipelines that are existing that they talk about, Algonquin, Tennessee Gas, they average 90% utilization of capacity, which means that 100% they're full. They can't take anymore. What happens at these ranges is that the capacity can't handle the sharp changes in demand. And what happens when you get beyond 75% utilization, you get spiking in prices because of trying to cram more into the pipeline, and prices go up. And these are data that comes from Algonquin Gas and Tennessee Gas pipeline. So if you have more pipelines, you have less utilization across the board. They're not pressured as hard, and so therefore they stay at a low capacity factor, less than 75%, and they absorb the swings in demand and supply of energy a lot easier than when you have a pipeline at 90% of capacity. A couple other just data points that I think are important. Gas-fired generators, which is what's going to be replacing the capacity that was lost in, you talk about Brayton Point, it's not going to last 5 more years, and it'll be shuttered.
Breakdown point.
Pardon?
Breakdown point, they call it.
The Pilgrim is going down. Yankee is gone. We're losing a tremendous amount of base generation. The only place it can come from is gas. Solar and wind are all noble endeavors, don't get me wrong, and conservation is one too. But for such large numbers, you can't just depend on those. We will run into hard winters here if we don't have the capacity to fill. You talked about how much oil would need to be burned, what the difference in environmental emissions would be. There's some numbers here. By 2020, absent new pipeline capacity, New England generators would encounter the equivalent of 12 million megawatt hours of supply deficit in natural gas to meet power demands. Using fuel oil instead of gas to bridge this deficit would emit an additional 5,000 tons of nitrous oxide, 67,000 tons of SO2, 5.6 million tons of CO2. Than the gas-fired generation that you could put in place to have you have the capacity. These additional emissions would sharply reverse the previous decade's reductions and just wouldn't be acceptable. I really suggest this committee think long and hard before they cast an opposition to what basically is a straw man. That's what we don't like. We don't like fracking. It's like sausage. Once you watch it made, you never want to eat it again. Well, this is sort of the same thing here. If you went out and watched a fracking well, you would feel horrible about it. But if you look at the facts of fracking that are out there, it's not as bad as people would like you to think. Just a few other quick facts, and then I'll get quiet on this and you all can go home. But let me just find where I wanted to be here. You know what? I don't have it, so I'm not going to. But it's about 7 million gallons of water is necessary to frack a well. And the data that I read, and I didn't bring it with me to back it up, in Pennsylvania, what they estimate is they use about 2 billion gallons, a year in fracking water because they recycle most of it. They use far more, 770 million gallons in industry. Agriculture takes another 89 million gallons. Fracking is not sucking the groundwater out and ruining all the groundwater because we take it out of the ground, because it doesn't take that much water. They recycle 90% of it. So I just want to make sure the committee really considers all the pluses and minuses before they endorse something like this.
Thank you, Mr. Manella.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir?
Inspector Energy, we have a few minutes before the committee.
Okay. Come forward.
Go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Good evening, and we know you've been here a long time this evening. My name is John Bonsall, and I represent Inspector Energy at the local permitting as well as government relations activities. Frank Gessner heads up the right-of-way group for the company and is responsible for all the landowner outreach efforts. We have a PowerPoint, which we're not going to show you, only in the interest of time. Or we can, if there's a unanimous vote of the committee. But I did think it was helpful, perhaps, if we go through a few things and answer some of the questions that members have asked. First of all, with respect to energy, we are not Kinder Morgan. Kinder Morgan was clear-cutting through a fair amount of western Massachusetts. No gas was, in fact, going to the communities that the pipe was going through. A quarter of their route is going through public lands, state forests, lands that are preserved, such as Article 97 properties, and that certainly generated a lot of the opposition that they faced there. Clearly, Mr. Masiello, you'd rather burn natural gas than fuel oil. Give you a little background. We have appeared before the Board of Selectmen and gave them a presentation. Representative Kane and Senator Moore, as well as the town administrator, have met with us on several occasions getting information so that they could, in fact, represent to the constituents in Shrewsbury, the residents, some facts about the project. Last Thursday, we were at the Italian-American Victory Club. We had a landowner information meeting where all of the residents along the pipeline corridor, is a study corridor at this point, had an opportunity to come in and get information about the project. What I wanted to kind of highlight for you in the presentation is a couple of the facts, because I think it is important to understand a little bit of the background about what we call the Access Northeast project, totally separate and distinct from anything Kinder Morgan is doing. We're two separate companies. It's two separate projects. There are multiple benefits that flow to the community of Shrewsbury from this project. The representative had mentioned earlier, Frank just completed a project into downtown Manhattan, the Spectra did. The people in New York City are paying 50% for each gas molecule compared to what you're paying in Shrewsbury. So if you're paying $1, they're paying 50 cents. Why? Because we expanded pipeline capacity into Manhattan, and that went through New Jersey, et cetera. Those people are benefiting from lower-priced, domestically produced natural gas today. We are not. One of the key benefits here is Eversource Energy has, in fact, and Bill Paulin from Eversource is here. He'd be glad to speak to the committee. Eversource has identified a critical need for additional gas supplies in this area, Worcester County. In fact, there's only one feed into the Eversource system in Worcester, in the greater Worcester area, as I understand, which is Tennessee to the south. We would give them a second feed to the north. There is no existing feed to the north right now that I'm aware of. They've identified a need. They have the Worcester County area is one of the two fastest growing service districts within the entire company. There's a lot of gas conversion. They're also finding a lot of the larger customers are coming back to their system. Our construction schedule would be 2018, 19, and 20. So the west, what we call the West Boylston lateral, would be in service, I think, in 19. Not 2022. And we are the only option for Eversource right now in order to provide the gas that they have forecasted that they're going to need. They will have to file with the state to get approval of the contract they enter into with us to show the public need and necessity. But the gas that's coming in is going to service communities such as Shrewsbury. The bulk of the Access Northeast project, however, is really geared to providing gas during the peak periods to electric generation. As everybody reads in the papers, there's pipeline constraints, there's pipeline constraints. The way that manifests itself is in the wintertime when the electric generation industry is trying to produce electrons, they can't get the fuel. They can't get gas. They wind up burning fuel oil. The studies that we've produced show on an annual basis electric ratepayers will see a reduction in their bills of $1 billion on an average winter in New England. If Access Northeast had been in the ground in the winter of 2013-14, the savings that year to electric ratepayers would have been $2.5 billion. Those are ratepayers throughout this area. You also, in the last 2 years, we've burned more fuel oil in the production of electric generation, very similar to the concerns being expressed over here. Fuel oil, no matter what you think about fossil fuels, fuel oil is much dirtier than natural gas. So there is a air emission benefit that will also occur because you're going to back out that fuel oil. So the town of Shrewsbury should see, and I know you've got a municipal light department here, lower electric rates, and there should be some impact, even though I'm sure Shrewsbury is very competitive with the electric distribution companies in the area. The gas is needed in your area. You've got fewer air emissions. There's an ad valorem tax that will apply. It typically ranges $50,000, $60,000 per linear mile. So using what the town administrator gave as numbers, you're talking about $250,000 of additional tax revenue as a conservative estimate that the community would recognize. And lastly, and again, there's a lot of material here. I'm going to leave you with a couple of handouts. We have a fact sheet that Spectra puts together on hydraulic fracturing. We printed out some materials in terms of the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, which heavily regulates the hydraulic fracturing industry in the state of Pennsylvania, so you get an idea of how robust the regulation really is. I'm going to leave with you a decision from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission on one of our projects that talked about what stuff is in the gas, like radon and other things that have been mentioned tonight, and basically show that there's no issues with PCBs, radon, things of that nature. So the idea that there's a lot of bad stuff in the gas just is not correct. It just is not correct. And the last thing is quite frankly, no matter how supportive you are of renewable power, and one of my partners represented Cape Wind, most people in that industry will tell you that at best you're going to have about 50% of the electric generation in the region coming from renewables. That still leaves 50%. And believe it or not, the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. So the role of natural gas generation long-term, this is not a short-term solution. Long-term natural gas generation is critical for New England. And as we all know, Pilgrim just decided they're going to retire in a couple of years, and the ramifications from that are going to be felt, and are being analyzed because it took a lot of people by surprise. We can go on for about another 2 hours, but I think that covered the highlights. We have information in here in terms of the West Boston lateral, as well as other component parts of the Access Northeast project, because it spreads over 5 states. We have facilities in 4 different parts of Massachusetts, one of which is the West Boston lateral that goes through the town of Shrewbury. And one of the things I do have to go back, one of the reasons Kinder Morgan really did generate so much opposition, one is they did not reach out to many of the local communities in advance. We always tried to do that. And secondly, they were clear-cutting. And what we are doing is following an existing electric utility corridor. That's our primary way of siting facilities throughout the Spectra system. And that significantly reduces the impacts to a community. That's a major difference between the other 40 or 50 communities that were passing resolutions. So in essence, the article before you says, do you want the benefits or you don't want the benefits? And from my perspective, it's as simple as that.
I'd like to say to everyone, this literature is very helpful, both sides. So if anyone has literature they want us to read up on as it relates to this, give it to us in advance, because it helps us to be able to manage the discussion better if we have it in advance. Ms. Benner.
I guess a question that I have is, I'm hearing a lot of numbers thrown around as far as potential cost savings for people in this area. You've cited a couple times, or maybe not you, but it's been cited a couple times tonight how New York is paying half what we pay. You also cited some very large numbers that are saved over different regions. My question is, do you foresee that we can go to the bank with the fact that we're going to pay, half what we're paying now, as you cited in New York?
You're probably not, because you've got a mixture of gas coming in. It's not all going to be the lower gas, and literally it costs to transport the gas, so it's always going to be higher in Massachusetts. But you should see a reduction. And I'd like to think a significant reduction over time.
What's significant?
Yeah, can you give me something?
Oh, if I could do that, I'd retire tomorrow. And
well, okay, so
no, I'm serious.
That's nice, but here we are. You said this comes down to, do we want the benefits or don't we want the benefits? I don't know what the benefits are. I don't really hear any benefits from you right now because you backed off that number. And I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm just trying to say, if you boil this down to, do we want the benefits or don't we want the benefits, then I'd like to know what those are.
You've got savings to electric ratepayers.
How much?
That's the $1 billion per year. All right. Last year,
and
all
what
of the
does that mean to a homeowner?
I'd have to get you that number. I don't translate it down that low. But last year, everybody saw a 40% increase in their electric bills because of the pipeline constraints. This winter, I think it's National Grid has come out and said they expect a 20% increase. The Access Northeast is designed to address those price hikes and spikes during the course of the winter. All right, that's where the $1 billion on average comes from. That's where the $2.5 billion comes from in terms of the winter 13-14. Air emissions is a clear winner, both in terms of conversion from home heating oil to natural gas, but also on the electric power industry. And I may have said this before, but in the last 2 years, we've burned more fuel oil in the production of electric generation than we had burned in New England in the 12 years before that. And that's because of pipeline constraints. So the generators have had to put fuel oil, 30-day capacity, that they rely on in the peak periods when they can't get the gas from the pipeline. And then, again, in this region, Eversource has identified the need for additional gas to be able to service communities such as Shrewsbury. And there's 2 issues there. One is just the growth that's occurring, but there's also, and again, Bill Pollan would be glad to come up, redundancy or what I call reliability. Because right now there's 1 feed in. If they lose that feed, then Worcester doesn't have a second option right now. And they're also, by getting 2 feeds, it allows Eversource to potentially play the market and see where they can get a better. They've got 2 ways of getting the gas into their system. That allows them, in a competitive situation, to see if they can do a little bit better. We clearly are paying twice per gas molecule than they are in New York. How that savings translates, I don't have an absolute number for you. Is it 25%? I'd be surprised if we don't cut the gap in half. But that's on today's picture. You know, if the price in New York goes up to 10, we otherwise would have been 20. So it's not that we're going to be at 750, but we're going to be higher than New York, but we're not going to be twice as high.
Thank you. I have a follow-up. I will say that I do think that if you're going to throw out the half savings for while people make this decision, it would be nice if we could tighten up on those numbers so that people would have a better idea of really what the benefits are to them. And then I guess the second question, I think it's good news that you would be going down existing power lines so you wouldn't have a lot of clear cutting. But if what we heard early on, that it was going to go under, it was several bodies of water, what type of disruption or effect?
Okay, on the large bodies of water, the large ponds, we use what we call a horizontal directional drill. So it's similar to a water well drill, except it's on an angle. And so they'll drill underneath the pond. At the invert, you're probably looking at about 80 to 120 feet. You look for a solid medium like rock, because you don't want to have one media then go into a sand and gravel, because what happens is you lose the drill and you got to start over again. So they do core bores, first to determine what the soil is prior to completing the design. So all of the large ponds, sometimes if there are large wetlands, rather than open and cutting the wetlands, we also look at using a horizontal drill. So there's no disturbance to the soil, to the surface, because you start and end on the upland sides.
Okay, I won't pretend that I followed all of that, but
Well, just assume this is a lake.
Right.
We're going, and let's say this is the lake bottom.
Right.
We're 80 feet below it with the pipe,
okay.
on average.
And you start over here, and it
All right.
goes down.
So as
and
far
up.
as fish and wildlife,
You never impact.
Never impact.
Frank and I have done projects on the North Shore where we went under reservoirs, drinking water reservoirs, as well as rivers and out into the ocean. I mean, we've done all sorts of different construction opportunities in terms of horizontal directional drill or HDD. And the intent is to minimize the impacts.
In New York, I think we did almost 8 horizontal drills. Some of them were over a mile long. We crossed the Hudson River with one drill.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, I think we've pretty much covered everything. Yes, sir?
Hi, Jason Molina, Shrewbury, 31, Good Avenue. I think there's one matter that hasn't been addressed at tonight's meeting, and it's really more of a financial question. We know that, or I assume that at being at the meeting that these gentlemen were speaking of most recently with the landowners, of course, I'm not a landowner in this property and what's going to be abutting this pipeline, but my question for you all is, do you know what the impact is in terms of land values or assessment of their house for the owners that are going to have this pipeline either on their property, if it happens to, as we heard from the last meeting that they gave a presentation in August, right, saying that they'll try to go down the corridor of the national grid right away, but if there was something, an obstruction in their way that they had to cross outside that boundary, now you're talking about somebody else's property, right? So what's the impact of those residents? And I know every case is going to be different depending on how much is on the property, but is there any kind of sense of what is the general impact of those people?
okay. The answer is question. When we work with the electric utility, corridors, we try to use as much of that corridor as possible. For example, you start out with the pipeline being about 5 feet on the outside, of the corridor. Permanent easement for this particular size 16-inch line is 30 feet wide. So the pipe's not 5 feet on the outside, so you have 20 feet of permanent on the outside. Temporary workspace, we try to put all of it on the inside, so you're not clearing. So any additional clearing that we have to do is within typically a 20-foot. Until we do the survey, and that's what we're trying to do right now, is talk to the property owners, get survey permission so you can walk on their property, the civil surveyors can get their work, the environmentalists can get their work done, and the archaeologists can get out there and get their work done. So we can gather the information so that between now and next January and February, when we have the next series of meetings, which is the open houses, when the property owner such as yourself comes in and asks a question, we can now show you, where that pipeline, where we're proposing to locate the pipeline, and you can ask further questions. Can you further refine it? A couple came in the other night. Their concern was it looked like it was very close, to an outshed. We noted that. We made the change. A couple other property owners in another town came over, actually suggested some changes to the route. We're taking that back. I have a meeting tomorrow, with the project team to discuss it because it looks viable. Because it reduces the amount of trees that are being cut, it reduces the amount of rock, moves it away from homes. So we take that all into consideration. As for value, what we do is we hire, an independent appraiser or appraisers, a team of appraisers that go out and they do a market study. What they do is they base, that market study on, property values. That would, what property would sell for along the pipeline route. We use that information at the time that we go to buy the right-of-way. And a right-of-way, as you said, as it impacts a piece of property, it may be at 10% of a value, it might be 50% of value. Depends on how it impacts it. We negotiate with the property owner for that interest. If we get to an impasse, we're just this far apart, we hire another, and it might be the same appraiser. That appraiser this time will come to you, talk to you, meet you on your property, understand all your concerns. They prepare a report, they send that report to us. We look at the report, whatever that number that they provided, we look at that compared to what we've made for an offer. If that number is higher, we're going to offer you the higher value, right? Because we want to make sure that we close as many as we can on a voluntary basis. And that's our goal. I mean, I've been working for this company for 45 years. I've been doing many projects, as John explained to you, all over the Northeast. We range about 4-5% people actually go to federal court, on a project. So you got on this project, you're looking at over 2,000 property owners. My goal, once again, on any project, I'm optimistic. I try to hit 0. I don't always hit 0. I've hit 2%. I've hit 5%. On a project. All right.
And may I?
Sure.
Follow up? So as a tax assessment, is it net neutral, given, or is it rated differently in terms of the easement? Is it valued more or less than a residential property?
It would have no impact on the town's finances at all. None. 0.
Okay. And may I ask another question,
Okay.
which hasn't been asked? At the August meeting, Selectman Kane had raised a question regarding governing bodies, local municipal bodies that would be involved in the process. I know at the end goal is a FERC approval, right, which will give you, go ahead, build it, and nothing can stop you at that point in terms of the approval. But along the way, he asked a question about what's the local bodies that would be involved. And I don't think there was an answer really to that local question. So does anybody know at this point?
Yes. Yes. Again, if they get the FERC certificate, they build a pipeline. They're required to deal with each individual community, Conservation Commission, Highway Department, Sewer Department, all of, just like they're building any other project. They have to comply with the Wetlands Protection Act. There are Chapter 91 certifications that have to be done, the whole 9 yards. Corps of Engineers, the gentleman can probably give a better explanation. For the Conservation Commission, they'll do a massive filing, and we'll have to take it parcel by parcel. Some of it is upland area, so there'll be no need for a conservation order of conditions. But there are others that'll be in wetland areas. There'll be requirements that they comply with. Some of the parcels, if this gets built, are going to be town properties, and there'll be issues that we'll have to negotiate with them relative to restoration of public properties, public streets, sidewalks, water and sewer infrastructure that may need to be altered and moved is going to have to be worked out. There may be some electricity issues that we need to deal with because they're moving very close on the route to the Rolfe Avenue, both water and sewer, but also electricity infrastructure. All that will have to get worked out.
And then lastly, related to those departments, does the school department, as an example, have any input into just proximity of the pipeline being near the high school?
Well, look, I don't have any safety concerns. The superintendent of schools hasn't told me they're concerned about it. We'll have to talk, obviously, to the school committee. There's a property that the power lines do run by the high school. Those are issues that we're going to have to discuss. There are pipelines, gas pipelines that crisscross the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And This isn't new. This is not novel. There's nothing here that we're not going to be able to handle.
No, understood. This is whether more there is a proximity issue in terms of the high school. Do they go further to the right?
Well,
further to closer to
again,
the left?
we're looking forward to the opportunity to sit with them on each of these parcels and find out exactly what's being proposed. But we're not to that point yet. We don't know if this project's going to go. And when it does, we'll, in typical Shrewbury fashion, we'll exercise the whole thing. We'll have a presentation that we'll make the town meeting to the public, demonstrating how the public interest is being protected.
Thank you.
Mr. Better?
I guess a follow-up actually on this resolution. Let's say that town meeting passed this resolution. What would that mean? Would that mean that this is done? And what does this resolution mean?
You become the 51st community.
Okay.
This has no binding effect.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, wait a minute. I'm not done. I just want to. So I want to understand that a little bit. So we would be passing this resolution. Let me play this out just a little bit. So if the town of Shrewsbury wanted to pass this resolution to send a message, let's say that they were committed to renewable as opposed to some of these other fossil fuel, you're saying it wouldn't stop the project, but it would be sort of signing on with these other 50 communities. Is that really what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
Because I don't know what the other 50 communities are doing. The community of interest here of Shrewsbury and the other 50 is quite disparate. Because in Shrewsbury's case, we're a landowner. We have a public interest to protect a requirement to protect the public interest, and we're in the energy business. So I don't know how many of those 50 communities are actually able to hit each of those criteria. And what I've just given you is a note from Michael Hale on the matter of this question. And we can sort of hand those around. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I will read just two paragraphs. I'll read the first paragraph that says, I understand that the natural gas pipelines are a sensitive issue for many of our customers, but I want to explain Selco's view from a pure business perspective. New gas pipelines are not just an option, they're a necessity. And he goes in to describe the issues that he's seeing as the Selco general manager relative to the constriction in pipes and gas supply in the New England region, how it's affecting a very important business that the town of Shrewsbury is engaged in, which is providing energy to our residents. And he talks about the diesel, the amount of diesel that's now being burned as opposed to what was burned previously, the issues of the coal facilities coming offline, Pilgrim coming offline. So he goes into a multi-page explanation. So that's the first paragraph. I'll read the last paragraph. It says, parties throughout the state can argue the best route for expanded natural gas. However, the need for the pipelines is a reality. Selco is not invested in the path of the pipeline. We are invested in a reliable source of energy that is affordable and keeps our economy moving forward. So that's... So I don't know how many of those 50 communities.
Right.
In addition to that, we're a major gas consumer.
So when he talks about that diesel, I mean, there's like some sort of a generator. I think it's over like back of Home Depot. And
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about? When I believe those are fired up when they need extra. Is that right?
We've been running that infrastructure more and more because of the shortages of electricity.
Okay.
Now, when we're running that, we're burning diesel.
Okay.
We're making money on the deal. Obviously, we don't run that peaking plant until it's very lucrative for us to do so. But again,
But is what this memo is sort of alluding to then that we would need to run that diesel generator less if this pipeline went through?
Well,
is that fair?
I think he's not talking about this pipeline. This resolution does different things. We seem to be mixing all kinds of.
All right, but the pipeline will bring more natural gas. So if we had more natural gas, so let's just talk about capacity.
Mm-hmm.
is this saying then that we would need to run those diesel, I don't know if the
Not-
generators are what you call?
No, because part of the problem we're having is currently is there's so much capacity, generation capacity coming offline suddenly that the question is, where's the capacity going to come from to replace what's coming offline? So I would say in the short term, no.
Okay.
I would think that if additional gas supply comes into this region, what you're going to see is additional gas-fired facilities coming online. Perhaps does Brayton Point, for instance, convert to gas? I don't know. I don't know what the plan is for Brayton Point.
Ms. King?
Brayton Point is the largest non-nuclear power plant east of the Mississippi. It's huge. When that goes offline, that's 1,600 megawatts of power that's just gone.
You know, the last paragraph on the bottom of the first page, we have a math problem for the future. The phasing out of coal in New England is now nearly complete. In addition, there are serious and successful efforts to close nuclear plants in the region as well. Just 2 weeks ago, Pilgrim Nuclear in Plymouth announced it will close within 4 years. With the recent closure and soon-to-close coal and nuclear plants, our region is in need of an additional 600,000. So that's 6 billion. Is that how we'd read that? 600 billion cubic feet of gas. So.
Okay.
I think it's just important to clarify, Judy, from your question, what you're asking. I think it's important to understand that we're not trying to pit, in the grand scheme of things, renewables against the gas supply. All of it is needed to move forward. The issue is that renewables at this point do not actually feed into what is called your base load, which is your guaranteed amount that you need. Renewables don't factor into that. You can't count that in base load. So the times when you need the energy the most, it is not around because solar is not in demand in the winter. It's not in supply in the winter. It's in supply in the summer. And the same thing with wind is not a reliable, so they don't count that into the base load. And so what we're talking about is we need to have more energy sources coming in to account in that base load. And so it is not to demean moving forward with renewables. It's to say that that isn't something that can be counted towards what we need. And the other thing is renewables are still the most expensive form of energy that's coming in here. And so we have to think of both those things, the reliability and the availability as well as the cost piece. And so I think it's important that we don't make people think it's a choice between those things. It's really a choice of saying we need to make sure that we have the right amount of energy coming in. And as we move forward, it will hopefully be in all those complements.
Last comment, but
The issue of concern Mr. Hales mentioned is the fact that so much of the base load is disappearing.
Correct.
Right, I think that's an important point. So I think,
okay, so if we could direct the questions through the chair, because I'm trying to call on Mr. Glotus for the last 10 minutes.
Madam Chairwoman, I will not take 10 minutes. As a point of clarification to the rest of the board members, there's some confusion. There is no community in this West Boylston lateral that has actually opposed this project. These 51 communities are a different project in a different part of the state. Matter of fact, almost unanimous support has been given to do the survey work by every municipality. There is no town, no community along the West Boylston lateral that has opposed this publicly. So there's a lot. We keep being linked with a different project, a different pipeline, and a whole different set of circumstances and problems that are not related to the West Boylston laterals. I just wanted to make that point of clarification.
Thank you. It's important. Yes, sir.
My name is Bill Pollan. I work for Eversource Energy, Gas. I'm the principal engineer in the gas engineering group. And I've met some of these gentlemen at the meeting a couple of weeks ago. I know it's running late. I'm not going to talk about a lot of the things that are outside my sphere of influence, but I would like to talk a little bit about our need for gas and how our company positions itself to try and deliver the lowest cost gas to its customers. I just have a little drawing that I put together for our meeting last week at the Italian Victory Club, just to give a rough idea of answering the question why this area needs gas. I've been, as principal engineer in the gas engineering group, my main function is system analysis. Myself and one other person, we maintain and control the hydraulic gas model that mimics the entire gas distribution system in our entire system. And what that means is basically no one in the field can cut a pipe, add a pipe, or retire a pipe without going through my approval or my partner's approval. And in addition to maintaining the current system, we also look forward to what our potential needs are going to be in the future. And I've been compiling statistics on our gas needs for the last 15 years, both with respect to the amount of activity in a certain town, I do this by town, and also by the amount of accepted load that we can take on our system. Those are important bellwethers that help us identify the areas of future growth and where we should invest our capital spending. Of the last 15 years, almost without exception, Worcester and Cambridge and Worcester have been our most active and largest load areas of requested load in our entire district. We also cover the New Bedford district, the Plymouth system, Cambridge, Somerville, and our Worcester Southborough system stretches from Worcester all the way into Hyde Park in Boston. So you can see that Worcester and Cambridge get a tremendous amount of oversight and scrutiny by us to make sure that the customers get the gas they need. The Cambridge system was coming up short, and in 2009 we combined with Spectra and did the J2 lateral project and increased the amount of gas into Cambridge by about 50%. That will increase our ability to sell gas in that district for quite a few years to come. The Worcester system specifically is, I'm going to take you back about 20 years to how our system has been developed. The entire Worcester system consists of a loop, which I've outlined in green, and it basically covers all of the feeder mains that go to the surrounding towns. We've got a main that goes up to Holden, West Boylston, Shrewsbury has 2 now, and going down into Grafton, Millbury. In other words, our entire area, this entire area, is fed from this one take station, which does come from Kinder Morgan. And it's been that way for a long, long time. This is how our system is built out. In the mid-90s, we started losing pressure up here. Holden was starting to get very weak. We were also seeing issues in Shrewsbury because the Burns Bridge pipe that we had across Burns Bridge was retired, and that eliminated a real issue of supplying gas into the White City Route 9 area, which was your commercial development area. We were really starting to see problems there. So what we decided to do was develop what we call the Crosstown Feeder Project. We designed in the mid-90s a plan to send a high-pressure gas lateral through basically the eastern side of Worcester, past Green Hill Park, to end with a regulator up here to service the northern half of our loop, so now that the loop could get more pressure. We started this as a multi-year project, and in 2004 we weren't done, and the system got a little behind on us, and we lost customers in Shrewsbury up in the Blackthorn Road area, which was a giant embarrassment for us because while I was doing system analysis at the time, we did have some regulator issues, but if we'd had more pressure, we would have overcome them. So we try not to do that because obviously in January, cold, frozen pipes, a whole host of issues. So in 2005, we finally finished the Crosstown Feeder, and that has been keeping us in good stead basically for the last 10 years. But now we're running out of gas again. We see the exact same thing happening in the northern part of our system. We're looking at pressures being reduced at Shrewsbury, even though we've got a new pipe across the new bridge over Lake Quinsigamond. We're still seeing pressure improving, but still degrading over time. Shrewsbury still has a lot of activity, and we also have to contend with the one big elephant in our system in this area, which is UMass Medical. They take a tremendous amount of our gas, and they take it all year long because they run it very heavily in the summertime for their cooling load. And you can see what that does. UMass Medical is on the Shrewsbury side. That takes a lot of your gas. And it's a medical facility. We have to maintain that as well as obviously take care of Shrewsbury. All in all, in order to try and maintain this for the future, we have decided that the best way to do it is to put another take station on the northern side of our Crosstown Feeder. What this will do is it'll give us the exact same capacity coming up from the south, but with another one from the north. Our central pressures will increase tremendously as a result, and now, because this one is fed from Kinder Morgan and this one is going to be fed from Algonquin, we will have not only 2 redundant take stations that can service this entire area, but 2 separate companies feeding with 2 separate pipelines. The redundancy that this gives us a tremendous amount of reliability for this system. Because hanging off of just one, we would lose in the wintertime, winter peak conditions, basically all of these towns. Now we have the second feed. Now that kind of rolls us into the Kinder Morgan proposal. Some of the information about the Kinder Morgan, because they were originally scheduled to come through Bolton, coming up through this way. I was the engineer that was there at the Bolton meeting last year and was able to present this to the town folks. They, in all due respect to them, they did ask the question, if we get that pipeline, what's in it for us? And it gets to our economics again. Bolton is in our sphere of influence. It's part of our service territory. The pipeline companies cannot serve the general customer. That's our regulated territory, so to speak. So only we can serve Bolton. I explained to them that we would only expand into their town if there was an economic benefit for us. And they have orchards, they have farms, they have horses, they have a couple of schools, a police and a fire station. And I told them that there is no economic benefit for us to run miles of pipe to just pick up the schools and the town, because there's no development, there's no commercial or industrial anything in that town. And they were kind of happy with that because they didn't really want gas. They didn't see a need for it, either with a pipeline or from us bringing in a lower pressure line. But then again, that gets back to the economics. We would only expand our territory if it was economically feasible to do so. And if it's not, it isn't. Now, Shrewsbury has a tremendous amount of infrastructure, but a lot of it is fairly old. Yeah, there are some leaks. We have leaks throughout our system. More specifically, in our cities, Worcester, New Bedford, Cambridge, we have gas pipes that are over 100 years old, cast iron, and in wet areas, they have bell and spigot joints. We encapsulate them, we fix them. When the road work is being done, we go in, we replace them. If, like, getting back to the water problem, that you don't want to pave a street and then have to dig up a water main leak. Well, we don't want to have to go in and replace a pipe after that street's just been paved. A lot of towns give us a moratorium for 5 or 6 years before we're allowed to go back in. In any event, getting back to the economics of it, what the company does is they try and buy the least cost resources at any amount of time. And of course, all our rates are regulated by the DPU. We have to get approval for any of those rates. And what this will do, and Mr. Bonsall explained a little of it, is that now this gives us the opportunity, when we go out to bid for gas, to get a gas price from both companies to service this area and be able to arrive at the lowest price. In addition to that, which I don't have shown on the map, we also have LNG. In Hopkinton, we have an LNG facility there, and that speeds gas into the system from the east. That is pretty much at capacity at this point. So the only other alternative we have would be the LNG, which is pretty much already maxed out. So this is really the only game in town. What would happen if we don't build this? Well, basically we have to stop selling gas in this area. And it's just that simple, because if we don't have the gas to sell, then we're just going to have to shut off the town, and that's the way it goes. We have some towns that are on that verge right now because of our own infrastructure that we're trying to fix. But by using the LNG, we're able to help buffer the spikes of the gas coming through the pipeline in the winter times when they're at capacity.
Sir, excuse me. I just want to be sure I heard you right. Did you just say if we didn't support this, you'd shut off the gas to the town?
No, not shut off the gas. Stop the sales to new customers.
Okay.
Yeah.
No expansion of service.
I just wanted that to be clear.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We can't shut off anybody, and we don't want to lose them in January either. So
only on Bunky Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the existing customers we would have and we would maintain, but we would not take any new customers. Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't clarify that.
So we're hearing about this because of Bryan's presentation, right?
Well, actually, it was
this is the same presentation as maybe before the Board of Selectmen.
I know. But Bryan has an article, and this information is extremely helpful. But if they are going to be doing more work, they're coming back to us anyhow, right? I mean, this isn't the end of it for them. If whatever happens and as they move forward, they've got to come back and do another presentation, right?
Well, again, this is, first off, they've got to convince the state and federal authorities that there's a need for additional gas in this region. Okay? That's the first thing they've got to do.
Well,
they've also got to determine, do they have a feasible route? We're having a conversation, I believe, totally backwards here.
Exactly, and
Because-
so that's what I'm
because
trying to...
This is a concept, it's a proposal that needs all kinds of development because there's a million questions.
Right.
that need
So,
to be
so my point is, as you come forward, we're going to hear from you with a formal presentation, and this is more of a reaction to this petition.
No. I'm not sure what the question is.
Well, because I don't have you on the agenda, and I'm trying to figure out to be courteous.
Article 10.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Article 10 is directed against the Access Northeast
Exactly.
project and West Boylston lateral. That's why we're here tonight.
Right, so
And we've been invited by the town moderator to participate in the special town meeting as well.
that's fine.
All right.
That's not my problem. I'm trying to just put into perspective the time we're giving you tonight to go into such detail. Is it, do we have enough information to make a decision on this article? Because you'll be coming back to us anyhow.
Well, I certainly can come back anytime I'm invited.
He brings his drawing with him, even the cocktail.
I could come
like
back
it.
with a better graphic.
I like it. No, I mean, your information is very helpful, and I appreciate it. But I'm not so sure we need to talk longer
No.
just because this is...
The article goes much beyond the service territory of...
Because I have a lot of questions for you, but I don't think it's pertinent to Article 10.
I'll just mention one more thing,
Okay.
and I'll be finished. You have an idea of what our system looks like. The Kinder Morgan pipeline that we were originally proposing to join and participate in was approximately 25 miles long. And when they chose to relocate it to southern New Hampshire, that pushed it another approximately 20 miles further away from us, and that made that pipeline uneconomic for us because it doubled the cost.
Mm-hmm.
We amortize these costs over about 20 years, not just 1 year, so it's a long payout process. But the Spectra pipeline gets us back to approximately the same 25 or so miles, which is what we were trying to spend in far as building out our infrastructure here. So there's no question that we need this gas. My projections are looking that around 5, 6, 7 years from now, we're going to be in the same situation that we were back in 2004, and we would, to prevent losing customers in January peak conditions, just have to stop the sale of gas. So
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I get a card. If you have
Yeah.
any questions, I'll pass them up.
I've got a list.
All right.
I move to close the public hearing.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to deliberate on the articles. So do I have any motions?
I move the printed motion under Article 1.
Second?
Second the motion.
Can't second.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you. Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Article 1 passes. Article 2,
I move the printed motion under Article 2.
is there a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
3.
I think you don't need to ask if there's any opposed.
Oh, I thought I was hearing unanimous, I'm
maybe-
sorry.
I think you just have to ask it, right?
Oh,
Even if it's
all right, I will. Anybody opposed to Article 1 or 2? No? Okay, thank you.
I move the printed motion under Article 3.
And I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Article 4,
I move the printed motion under Article 4.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Article 5,
I move the printed motion under Article 5.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Article 6,
I move the printed motion under Article 6.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 7,
I move the printed motion under Article 7.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Article 8,
I move the printed motion under Article 8.
I second it.
motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Article 9,
I move the printed motion under Article 9.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Sometimes when I move motions, I forget to vote
Forget what
after.
you're doing, right? Okay, Article
For
10.
the purposes of debate, I move the printed motion under Article 10.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Is there any discussion?
Is the motion to approve, or?
He said he-
No, I moved it for the purposes of debate.
What is your motion? Is your motion to?
I moved the motion that we reject the printed Article 10.
Oh, okay,
Second.
sorry, I misunderstood.
I
you.
apologize, you know what?
So this is
That
a motion
correct, Mr.
to
Morgado.
reject, and it is a second to reject. For the
So an
purposes of
affirmative
discussion.
vote on the motion rejects
Right,
recommendation of
right.
Article 10.
Is there any discussion? No discussion. Now, remember, a yes vote rejects the motion, right?
I believe that is correct.
Okay.
No, the motion is not to recommend.
To not recommend.
Not
right.
recommend.
Oh, are we going to start this again
Yes.
this year?
Again, so our motion is to
Not
not
the thing-
recommend,
We are not
and
recommending.
there's a second for that. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No opposition. Okay, let's move on to the next part.